Smile, new horror film out in theaters, feature debut of director Parker Finn, starring Sosie Bacon, Jesse T. Usher, Kyle Gallner, Robin Weigert and Carl Penn. From the trailers, it looked to be a pretty generic curse horror film, but to my surprise, it ended up quite brilliant, mainly because of the great execution. And by the way, if you haven't yet seen the trailer, do yourself a favor and avoid it at all costs. Just go into the film blind, because the trailer spoils some really amazing moments. Now, to give you the idea of the plot without significant spoilers, the story follows Dr. Rose Cotter, a psychotherapist working at a mental institution. One day, a patient comes in, a young girl who's terrified of something, a young woman. She's absolutely shaken. She claims that ever since she saw her university professor kill himself in front of her a couple of days before, she's been seeing and experiencing this mysterious entity posing as other people, smiling at her in creepy ways. And it's been getting worse, and she's fearing for her life. And rightly so, because before the session is even over, the girl slices her own throat in front of Rose, all the while smiling in a creepy way. And then things get weird, because Rose herself begins seeing weird smiling people everywhere, and she begins to fear that this is a curse, that this is a repeating pattern passed down from one person to the next, and she's the current victim. So the film works on two levels for me. First of all, there's this simple curse story, which seems to be heavily inspired by The Ring in many of its aspects. And yeah, sure, it's a premise that we've seen not just in The Ring, but many times over, but it's executed very well. The story has proper suspense. When it's scary, it is properly fucking scary. It is also using the cinematic horror tools very well, isolating the character, making the story all the more tragic by having the most rational therapist suddenly succumb to this supernatural, unexplainable curse, and finding herself in a position where she isn't able to explain what's going on to people because it shouldn't make sense. And also, it's a film that uses jump scares in one of the best ways I've seen in years. I normally don't really like that element of horror films, but they are really well done, and they are properly terrifying in this film. The movie also makes heavy use of making us doubt the reality of what's happening. So many times a scene will take place where we think this is real, but it's actually a dream sequence or an illusion. And at some points I thought, okay, that's it, the movie will not get me with this again. And sure enough, it did. It feels hopeless, it feels paranoid and claustrophobic in a way. And then you have the secondary layer, which is also something that a lot of horrors seem to be exploring in recent ways, which is personal trauma and being able to process and to deal with it. But where this movie makes things interesting is that at some point I thought, knowing other movies, I thought, okay, this is where the trauma angle takes over and it's going to push the horror aspect into the background. And then it doesn't do that. The film ends up never compromising its nature as a horror film in order to make a point, and somehow still manages to make a point all the same. It's a tough thing to achieve, but here we are. Smile manages to do that. I mean, it's also got interesting score and cinematography, very good acting with some memorable side characters, and a straight up fantastic ending that left me absolutely shook in a way that I think only Saint Maud has been able to do so in recent memory. So once again, I know it looks generic and average on first glance, but trust me, Smile is genuinely great.